Hey, if you like my content, please consider subscribing, drop a like on my video, and share it on social media. Thanks. Hello and welcome to The Ordeal. So last night on June 21st, 2020, when I'm recording this, the Discovery Channel had on a special called Why We Hate. Now I think the Why We Hate program was a mini-series a year or two ago. I don't remember. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. My impression of it was that they showed two episodes back to back commercial free. They had commentary at the beginning, in between the two episodes, and at the end. And it was very anti white. It was obviously anti white. So that is racism, right? You can see that. They tried to kind of cover it up a little bit. They didn't like pull out all the stops and say, hey, look, white people are bad, and look at all the good things that black people do. Yeah, and look at all the good things that Asian people do, and look at all the good things that Hispanic people do. But white people, they're bad. They didn't do that. But all of the examples that they gave in the first episode were white men. We all know that white men are the most evil people in the world, right? That's how that works. Even though I I don't know white men to be any more evil than anybody else. So they featured just different white men who had joined these different organizations. They went so far as to have a Muslim man on their program, which it seems to me like it would be a lot easier to get a dark-skinned Muslim, a non-white Muslim. They found a white Muslim man. I went through all the trouble of finding a white Muslim man to put onto the program, and it actually said something about the Discovery Channel that they would consider associating hate groups and Islam together as one. That says a lot. They talked a lot about, or they mentioned it a lot. They didn't really talk about it though. Alt-right and white supremacy, and how they're just like trying to recruit people. They're being subversive and doing all this stuff, and I'm going, okay, well, I mean, from the things that I've said on this channel lately, you would probably call me alt-right or a white supremacist, but I don't know anybody who's in any kind of organization that is like racist. I don't, not that I know of anyway, and I don't think that we should be genociding other races. And I think that we just need to be able to stand up and say, hey, look, you're being racist against white people. And that's what I'm trying to do on this channel. But they would call me like a white supremacist because of the things that I say. I'm like, no, you're just being racist against white people. Stop it. The second half of the program, the second segment that they showed, it was a little bit more diverse, but it still emphasized bad behavior of whites. It focused on group more than an individual, on the group more than the individual, and how should we be punishing the lower level people in an organization? They're just following orders. It kind of focused on that more, but it talked mostly about the Nazis, and then it talked quite a bit about Pol Pot, which is Cambodian. And at the very end, the very last thing they talked about was the Houthi and the Tutsi. I think that's how you say that, the Africans. Yeah, the Houthi and the Tutsi. They saved it for the very end, after everybody was tired of watching and didn't want to watch anymore, and it probably switched off. And they didn't focus on the violence that either group had committed against the other group. They kind of glossed over a lot of the stuff, like, oh yeah, they were tricked into thinking that they needed to fight each other, basically, because the white people can make the decisions for themselves, but the Asian people, they can also make decisions for themselves when we talk about the Cambodians. But the black people, know they're not by nature racist, is what I got out of it. That's what it seemed like they were saying to me. They're not by nature against anybody or any other group. And really, if you look at it, the Houthi and the Tutsi are not being racist when they're fighting each other because they're both black. And I came across this years ago. I met a man who was in his 60s, and he had been tortured in his home country, and he sought asylum here in the United States. It's a good thing the United States exists and will let people who are not of the most populous racial group and not of the dominant culture come here. He was black. He's a black man, and he said he could never go back. He could never go back to his home country. He was a royal. He was aristocracy. He was actually, I think, the prince in his home country. He's like, I can't go back there. They'll kill me. I'm like, uh, how would they know you're a black person? He's like, just don't tell them who you are. He's like, oh, they can tell by looking at me. I'm like, um, you're black. And he goes, yeah, my nose is too wide and my hair is too soft. People will find a reason to discriminate against each other no matter what. I mean, I am a white man with brown hair and brown eyes. So what if we formed an organization that was anti-blue-eyed people? Didn't matter what your skin color was. It's just you have blue eyes. We don't like you. That there's a book series that I read that has that in it as a factor of segregation. Light-eyed people are considered aristocracy, and dark-eyed people are not. It's called Stormlight, the Stormlight series. What I got out of this whole series in general was we should not be mixing. Basically, that's what it comes down to. All the stuff they talked about, all the stuff that they showed, we're just not designed to live in close quarters with people with obvious differences, with different cultural backgrounds, different cultural beliefs, with different features. We're not designed for that. Human beings are not designed for that. So you probably shouldn't. A couple other things that came up in the series. At the end, they had a panel that consisted of 4 black people and 1 white person. And it was really obvious that the black people are just talking about how great they are and how much is not fair that they live in this country. And I know that 2 of them have a lot of money. At least, well, 3 of them, 3 of those black people out of the 4 have a lot of money. One was the presenter, who's a TV personality, right? So they have a lot of money. The other one is a Hollywood filmmaker who has made some movies that have gone into theaters nationwide. He has a lot of money. Another one is a football player. He has a lot of money. I don't know the other guy. I don't know. They talked about his background. It sounded like he's doing pretty well. And the other person was a white person. So you can have these people up in their ivory tower who can look down on everybody else and say, "This is what's really happening." Why don't you get somebody on there who's working class, a black person who's working class, a black person who's middle class on there? Pull them up and have them talk about their experience. Get a career military, a black person who's career military, who's been in the military for 10 years, and ask them how they see race in this country. You don't want to do that because they won't support your narrative. Say you take a person out of the U.S. military who's black, who's been in for 10 years. They got to work with white people. They got to work with black people. They got to work with Asian people. They got to work with Hispanic people. They got to work with Indian people. They got to work with Native Americans. They got to work with all different types of people. And they can tell you without a doubt that the race doesn't really matter. Can you do your job? Do you do your job? Are you a good person? That's what matters. They're dependent on each other for their life. They don't have time for racism in the military. And it makes me sad that this is what the country's coming to. And now we see that California is repealing the non-discrimination acts in the state. They're voting on that. It hasn't been ratified yet, but it voted and it passed. There's allowed to be segregation now. The state can discriminate based on race. One other thing that came out of the Why We Hate program they had on last night is I got a new definition for white privilege. The movie producer, I don't know what his name was, but the movie producer said that what white privilege means is that you might have hardships in your life, but those hardships are not because of the color of your skin. It doesn't make any sense because albinos can be black, right? You can have a black albino. They'll have white skin or lighter skin, but they'll still be black racially. So the color of your skin doesn't matter, but let's say he's talking about race. I have experienced hardships based on my race, and I know other people who have as well. I have been racially discriminated against more than once in my life. I've lived in the ghettos. I lived in cities that were predominantly black. I live in a state that's predominantly Hispanic. So basically most everywhere I've lived has not been my own race. So I've experienced discrimination quite a bit. I'm not the only one either. This has happened to other people. I know a gentleman who is I think he's half native, but he passes as white. You look at him, you'd be like, "You're white." And then when he told me he was half native, I was like, "Oh yeah, I can kind of see it a little bit." But he was trying to get a job at this company, and they wouldn't hire him. And he's like, "Well, I'm more than qualified for this, and you have a job openings, and you're hiring other people." But what he found out later was they only hire Hispanic people. He could have had a lawsuit on his hands, really, if he wanted it. But since he passes as white, they wouldn't hire him. They wouldn't give him the job, which is ridiculous because I've met some Hispanic people who look more white than I do. They have blue eyes. You go down to Brazil, they have all different kinds of races. I don't care. I've met Brazilians. I met three Brazilians a couple years ago. One was obviously Hispanic, and one was obviously Asian, and one was obviously black. Okay, how do you? So you're telling me that Brazil is not a diverse country? It's all all those people coming from Brazil are Hispanic. Culturally, ethnically, maybe yeah, they're all Hispanic, but racially they're different. You know, in America, we just need to tell these people to shut up. We're not gonna tolerate it anymore. We're done with you. Everything, nothing needs to be changed. You're rebelling? Okay, fine. Here's the military. Have fun rebelling with the military in your face. The United States, people are still talking about slavery. The United States was a relatively small player in the slave trade. I think 400,000, which is a lot of people, but compared to the rest of the slave trade, that's small. You go down to Brazil, you go down to South America, there was like 2 or 3 million people or something like that that they took. Maybe even more. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but it was a lot more people they took to South America from Africa than they brought to the United States. And they don't have these issues, these racial issues. And it comes down to, what are you doing here? You're not helping anybody. You think you're going to help yourself. So we'll give the country over to black people, let them do whatever they want to do with it. How is that going to help you? You would see white people would just start leaving en masse. And then you would become a country that is dominated by black people, or Hispanic people in this case, really, because they're the next largest group. Last time I checked, Mexico is not as nice of a place to live as the United States. Neither is Honduras, or Panama, or Colombia, or Venezuela. None of those places are as nice to live as the United States. And I've spoken to people from those countries, and they say, yeah, it's nicer here. That's why I'm here. That's why I came here, to get away from that. El Salvador. Nobody can get a job because everybody has a master's degree or a doctorate in their field. There's no jobs. The economy is so slow that there's no jobs. But everybody has to be competitive, so they all have the highest degree they can get. This needs to stop now. We opened the doors and said, hey, we'll treat you the same, just act the same. And now even white people are just, they're racist against their own kind, against other white people. Like, you're evil because you're white.
I've done my research. You're fucking old. Old. You're fucking a white male.
I'm not evil because I'm white. That has nothing to do with evil. Race, we've been saying this for years. Race has nothing to do with whether or not you're a good or bad person, except for if you're white people, apparently. Anyway, I was very disappointed in the programming. They focus on how it's, and I mean, they threw in a little bit of token Asian people, and then a very tiny token, oh look, black people can do this stuff too, sort of. Not like white people and Asian people, but they can do it a little bit too. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.